So many of us would love to live to be 100 years old. I mean, I would love to be 100 years old. In Canada, it means you get a letter from the King of England, so at least you've got that going for you. However, very few of us actually make it. Those of us who know or have grandmothers or great-grandfathers who are centenarians, well, it's pretty miraculous. Around the world, there are 7 places called blue zones, where living to 100 is more common and living well into the 80s is the average. The Caucasus Mountains in southern Russia, the Hunza River Valley in North Pakistan, Okinawa, Japan, Sardinia, Italy, Nicoya, Costa Rica, and Ikaria, Greece. They're called blue zones because Belgian demographer Michael Poulain liked to mark them on maps with blue circles. One factor they all have in common? Mountains and the great outdoors. In his book, The Blue Zone Solution, The Revolutionary Plan to Eat and Live Your Way to Lifelong Health, author Dan Buettner describes the similarities of various centenarian populations and says residents who live in mountainous environments have a sense of community and of individual purpose. They take time to rest and relax, and they spend large portions of their days outside. If you've been in the basin long enough, you're most likely aware of our Blue Zone emissaries. People like Reno DiBiasio, the legendary 89-year-old trail native who's been ski patrolling at Roslyn's Red Mountain Resort for the past 62 years. When he's not at the hill, he spends his days cross-country skiing, and in the summer, he bikes, and he bikes, and he bikes some more. According to the Provincial Health Services Authority, British Columbia residents enjoy the highest life expectancy in the country, with an average of 82.3 years, 6 months longer than the Canadian average. But Basin residents can expect to live to 80.9 years, almost a year and a half less. So, if we have access to a fountain of youth, what could we do to work towards becoming a blue zone one day? The answer could lie with 85-year-old Caslow, British Columbia resident Dr. Lawrence Moss, who has a PhD in urban and regional planning and, no surprise, is an avid outdoorsman. According to him, recreating here simply isn't enough to ensure a long, vital life. When it comes to staying alive, we need to immerse ourselves in nature every day, not just zip through it on our boards and bikes. To quote Dr. Moss, "If you want the cherry on the sundae, the long, healthy life, then it's a total experience. It's about being a part of it. You come to realize that through recreation, even if it's just going for a walk outside, you are connected. It's knowing that you're a part of something greater, and that's as close as you get to nirvana." I'm Mitchell Scott, Editor-in-Chief at Kootenay Mountain Culture Productions, and this is The Headwaters, brought to you by Columbia Basin Trust. Aside from being active into our older years here in the basin, we're pretty good at surviving too. And in this episode of Stayin Alive, we're going to share some of those stories. We're approaching our theme quite literally in this feature story, like eating squirrels and grass stews staying alive, literally. Turns out the best characters to help us explore this topic are 2 East Kootenay bushcraft survivalists. And yes, that's the term. Bushcraft is the art of surviving and thriving outdoors. Greg Ovens and Alan Tenta are both past contestants on the History Channel's wildly popular Alone series, where 10 individuals survive on their own in a remote wilderness location for as long as possible, with only 10 items of survival equipment that they choose to bring along with them. Greg appeared in Season 3 in Patagonia, where he lasted 51 days before succumbing to hypothermia. Alan was in northern Saskatchewan for Season 10 and survived for 66 days, outlasting his 9 other competitors to win the $500,000 U.S. prize. Squirrels never tasted so good. East Kootenay writer and photographer Jeff Pugh met with both men to understand what it takes to survive and thrive when you're truly alone in the wild.
The thing about bow drill is, you got to be patient. It takes a lot of effort, but also you start off a bit slow. When you see your smoke, that's when you got to put a little more pressure, go a little faster. You hear the squeaking, but that's not the sound you want. See, now we're getting smoke. Now you go faster. I think we got her. You could go out, but it might not. I think it's going.
Welcome to the Headwaters Podcast, Jeff. Who's that we're listening to? He sounds about as survivalist Canadian as you can get.
Oh, thanks, Mitch. Awesome to be here. That was Greg Ovens, who I met this past summer in his year-round bush camp near Canal Flats, British Columbia, just south of Invermere. This is where he lives when he's not out adventuring, or the rare time he needs to get a motel room when it's too cold for his dog, Finn. Greg's 61 years old, and he's shown me this bow drill contraption, which is apparently the most efficient way to start a fire.
Aside from a Bic lighter.
You know what? Greg loves Bic lighters. He says that's actually, if you can have 3 Bic lighters in your pocket, even better. His camp surroundings are simple. A fire with an oven rack grate, a hammock, sleeping bag, tarp, a few weather-beaten chairs, and some pots and pans hanging from trees. Although Greg didn't win Season 3 of Alone, he was a fan favorite. He has amassed this huge YouTube following of about 850,000 fans. They love this guy.
I've watched him on YouTube. He is quite popular.
Yeah, they just adore him. He films all his own bushcraft episodes and fireside chats, where he tells these survival stories in a beat-up garden chair beside his campfire.
I've seen Greg's videos, actually quite a few of them, and he's a total YouTube sensation. But how do you get into bushcraft in the first place?
Yeah, you're right, Mitch. His fame is real. He makes a living doing this now. People stop Greg for photos all the time when he's traveling out on adventure. And like many bushcraft experts, he got into the outdoors as a kid. Here's Greg talking about how he first got interested in the outdoors.
I got my first survival book, which was Bradford Angier, How to Stay Alive in the Woods. And I was reading that at about 10. And it took a year or so when I started practicing some of the things in the book. By the time I was about 12, I had read all the books, but I hadn't really practiced a lot of what was in the books till I was about 12 and then started my bow drill fire. Then I was hooked. And then shortly after that, I basically realized that how important plants would be in a survival situation because you may not be able to get squirrels or game with traps, and you may not have fishing lines. So plants became an important part. Then I became kind of obsessed with learning plants because I realized how important they were. But yeah, very young age, reading the books, practicing it, and then developing my own ideas.
Greg eventually left the city and settled in the East Kootenays to work as a drywaller and raise a family. He has 2 kids, and his daughter had heard about the Alone series and contacted the producers. After a really rigorous selection process, Greg was invited to compete in Patagonia.
Which, as we've mentioned, he didn't win, but how do you do during the show? 55 days, still a long time.
He did awesome. Unfortunately, he made one mistake that he couldn't recover from.
I fell in the lake trying to retrieve a fish that was tangled up. And it was like quicksand. I couldn't move my feet, and I basically fell in the lake completely covered. It didn't matter what I did. I could not warm up after that. I ate my fish, built a big fire. But the last 2 days, I just could not warm up, even sitting by the fire. If I would venture 15 feet from the fire, I was cold within 2 or 3 minutes. So now I can't go check my lines. Hypothermia had set in to the point where I couldn't think straight. I was doing stupid things. I moved my camp in a rainstorm. I was losing my mind, and that's basically, I realized, well, I have to tap out. It was tragic in a sense, but what a great experience being on that show. Going that long, it was tough, but I would certainly do it again.
In Greg's YouTube channel, Ovens Rocky Mountain Bushcraft, he's made hundreds of videos on bushcraft survival. I asked him to share some survival wisdom in real time.
The most important thing in a survival situation is fire. So I've shown in my videos quite often lately, and I keep emphasizing it, bring a lighter. Not only that, have an alternative, maybe a ferro rod. Maybe you lose your lighter. Have a couple of fire starting methods. Don't rely on bow drills. Don't rely on some of the methods that they talk about in the survival books, because it's far harder to start a fire with a bow drill than people realize. And if conditions are wrong, like if it's rainy, windy, you're never going to be able to achieve that. So bring a lighter, bring a ferro rod, probably both, but fire's number one.
And Alan Tenta, who we're about to meet, also shares his survival tips.
Number one would be not telling people where you're going. So if you do get in trouble, they don't even know where to look. And I guess that's the easiest way to prevent an issue. If you don't come back or you don't report in when you said you were going to, people know to come looking for you and they know where to look for you. Because those two things are very important. Also, being prepared for anything. Like, you should never step out, even on a small outdoor adventure, without a basic little survival kit, either with a tarp, some rope, a communication device, a lighter, just things to get you through the night, some warm clothes, because most people in the bush die of exposure. So being able to keep warm and dry and light a fire, those things are very important.
Okay, those are beauty survivalist tips, eh? Let's find out more about Alan.
Yeah, sure thing. Alan Tenta was selected as one of 10 contestants out of 43,000 applicants for the show's 10th season, which has just grown in popularity. His victory was watched by millions of people, and it was life-changing. He quit his job as a high school outdoor ed teacher and is pursuing a career in public speaking and social media. He lives in the Columbia Valley, but I caught up with him in Kimberley after he spoke to an auditorium of high school students about the importance of unplugging and getting outside.
Our life has been so obsessed with speed and convenience, microwave ovens and coffee ready before we even wake up in the morning. But when you're outside, even simple things like lighting a fire or making tea, there's such a process. And it just, simple tasks that you have to do outside in nature, you never get to experience completing a task and feeling good about it when you're at home. It's very different.
Like Greg, Alan was introduced to the outdoors as a kid. In Alone, he shared a few emotional moments about missing his father and the important role he played in his life.
I think the biggest things that led me on this outdoor journey were being introduced to archery and fishing. And my dad introduced me to both of those, and those led the love of archery developed into a love of bow hunting. And bow hunting, you spend a lot of time outside. And just the things I've seen bow hunting is just, I could write a whole book on the incredible experiences I've seen, just sitting in a tree stand or hiking and hunting. And fishing, he introduced me to fishing when I was very young in Beaver Creek in the West Kootenays. And when I felt that first feeling of a fish on the end of my fishing rod, man, I was addicted for life.
I've watched a couple seasons of Alone, and I gotta say, these people are up against it. It's a gnarly competition. So when it comes to Alan, what do you think helped him win season 10? I mean, he's from the Kootenays, so he's got that going for him.
As I watched him get further and further into the show, he just became more and more positive, and sort of any adversity he came across, he just met it with this really positive attitude. I'll let Alan explain further.
I think my greatest strength in survival situation, because I consider myself just average at best. I don't have any special training in survival or bushcraft. It's just been part of my passions. I think on the show I demonstrated mental toughness and resilience, and just finding the strength to push forward and continue. And I guess fishing and bow hunting would probably be my other strengths.
And like most contestants, he had stretches without eating in times of extreme loneliness, but there was one situation he talks about that scared him the most.
On the show, there was one night I was actually a little bit worried about my life. And it could have been minus 27, and I woke up and I couldn't stay warm. I'd lost so much weight at that point. I'd lost probably close to 80 pounds by that point, and it was so cold. The inside of my sleeping bag felt like the inside of a freezer, like the edges. And I shivered through that night. I had all my clothes on, and I had the beginning stages of hypothermia. But I made it through the night, and I formulated a plan so I wouldn't have to go through that again, which would involve having 3 large hot bowling ball-sized hot rocks in my sleeping bag all night.
It's wild to hear the suffering these guys went through during the show. But after listening to them, it sounds like suffering is something they actually excel at and do well.
Yeah, totally, Mitch. These are 2 guys who feel most at home in the wild and thrive when challenges arise. Although they both live fully in the modern world, they seem at their best when they're out in nature. I'll let Greg wrap it up.
You got to be happy doing what you're doing. The last 10 years I was doing drywall, I wasn't happy at all. I mean, my back would hurt, couldn't sleep at night. You know, I'm just really glad that I'm doing what I'm doing and being able to teach people, entertain them. But you got to be happy doing what you're doing. Or try to find something else if you can.
I don't know about you, but my ideal vision of trekking through the wilds does not involve needing to survive. I don't think I would fancy squirrel, or hypothermia for that matter. I prefer to revel in the beauty of nature, build fires, erect my waterproof tent, and eat amazing foods. Most importantly, we all want to make it home safely to our loved ones, get back from the backcountry. But when things don't go as planned, we lose our way and end up in trouble, there's a group of volunteers that helps bring us back to safety. Jeff Pugh spent a night training with Kimberley, British Columbia's search and rescue team to learn more about this dedicated group of heroes.
We are heading up to St. Mary's Lake, just at the mouth of the river. We're going to be pulling out some of the swiftwater equipment, getting it all ready for the season, and just pulling out all of our boats and gear, making sure everything is ready to go, making sure all the safety equipment is there, and working just to check and make sure our suits and gear and stuff doesn't have leaks in it. It's a great way to test it out in the water, and do any repairs that are necessary. So when the time comes, we are ready to go.
Shara Martin-Preedy is a nurse at the Cranbrook Regional Hospital. She's volunteered with Kimberley Search and Rescue since 2015. Tonight, along with 12 Kimberley Search and Rescue members, she's participating in their Thursday night training session.
Every call could look a little bit different depending on the terrain we're going into and what kind of skill sets and gear might be needed and what kind of information we're operating on. Sometimes we have really precise and kind of precision strategic calls where we know what equipment we need to bring and we have an exact location and we can just come up with a great plan to get in and extract that person out. Other times we don't have a lot of information to go on, and so we load up with every bit of gear we could possibly need and hope that we're prepared for the situation. And you never quite know what you're getting into. It often pivots and changes as you go.
At the lake, Swiftwater team lead and training officer Marshall Ezeal runs through the objectives for the night.
So the goal today is I would like to pump all these boats up. I would like to show you guys how all that works, where all the tools are to make them ready. If you so choose, we may also paddle them around on the lake. Anybody have any guesses on what the PPE is to be on the lake? Life jacket. PFD in particular. So we have plenty of those in truck 5 if you want to take one or a couple of these boats out for a little spin, keeping in mind that we should be thinking about getting everything out of here at about 8 o'clock to make it back by 8:30.
Marshall wants volunteers to feel comfortable and confident setting up any one of their inflatable rescue rafts. He stresses that while some members might not have their Swiftwater training, they're highly valuable during the initial raft setup, while trained members plan their Swiftwater rescue operation.
Cargo straps for this. And there's a ratchet side and a hook side. Okay, the ratchet side should be on the passenger side, so if we have to stop and redo it on the highway, we're not standing in traffic. This is not a martial rule, this is actually something that is a law. Oftentimes I see people open this guy up, feed it through. You're not doing yourself any favors there, so close it, feed it through here.
Throughout the last 9 years, Shara, who's a mother of 3, has been in some sketchy rescue operations.
Never felt overly scared. I think that is the one thing about SAR being in a team environment is when you're not alone in those situations, it definitely helps with your confidence level, knowing that somebody's right there beside you. But yeah, we've had a few different areas, some rescues on the backside of Fisher, sometimes some of the Swiftwater, depending on how the water is flowing and the amount of debris and sweepers and things like that we have to access, or sometimes it is trying to access somebody who is in not a great situation in the water. Yeah. We are often putting ourselves at risk, and so we have to be really mindful of that. And at times just being a 46-year-old mother of 3 and keeping up with everybody in the backcountry and definitely pushes me to my limit, but I am happy to do it and see where those limits lie.
Later that night, on the drive home, Shara reflects on the diversity of her team and encourages anyone interested in joining search and rescue to get involved.
It is a great team to be a part of. And you know what? You don't have to come in with any previous experience. We have people from all different walks of life. We have retired university professors. We have people that are rafting guides or backcountry guides. And we have everything else from accountants, farmers, and everything in between. It's a really diverse group, and everybody brings something unique to the table.
Since we're on the subject of staying alive, we thought you should know that Cranbrook taxidermist Wilf Lloyd is an expert. 10 years ago, Wilf was hunting with his son-in-law, Skeet, when Wilf was brutally attacked by a grizzly in a heavily wooded area, 8 kilometers south of Fernie, British Columbia. Wilf survived after Skeet shot the grizzly multiple times during the attack. He then spent 2.5 months in the hospital recovering from wounds that still affect him to this day.
And I'm laying there on the ground and everything's through the mist and I see my wife walking through the trees. That to me was probably, out of anything you ever see in your life, is probably the most surreal moment in all my life, you know. And so she was there and the paramedics are there now and they're on a stat phone to Calgary and I'm screaming, give me something for the pain. And I probably asked the paramedics 4 or 5 times, look, I just want you to be straight up. Is this where I die? Am I going to bleed out? Am I going to die here? I'm okay if you can tell me. And I looked at both of them and they were both bawling their heads off. When I get into the hospital and sure, I'm on every painkiller known to man, but I'd go to sleep and I would wake up and it would be a nightmare. I could smell him. I could see him. I could feel the slobber on him. I could see his eyes rolling in his head. I could see his mouth opening. I could see his tongue. I could see his head bobbing down towards me. I could see his eye roll as he looked down towards me. And for 4 nights, it was just, if this is the rest of my life, I'm in serious trouble. And after the 5th night, I never had it, and I have never had it again. I have never thought about him. I don't have him in my dreams. I don't have him. He's eliminated. It's like it's just washed away and he's gone.
The wilderness of our region comes with real dangers. Wilf reflects on the incident with a profound sense of knowing that it wasn't his time to die. We'll leave the final word with him.
Is that divine intervention? I don't know. You would like to. I would like to think that. I'd like to believe that. There's just too many things that aren't coincidences. Cell service. You go a quarter mile one way and you don't have cell service. Where the bear attacked, there was cell service. The chopper that was, it should have been longer. It was like 29 minutes, and they were there. The search and rescue, you know, the paramedics were there within 11 minutes. I mean, there's just so many things that just line up. You know, I don't know. There's that thing that it is always a part of a thought process in the overall incident or attack or whatever it was. That's how I look at it. If there is a hero in my life and a guy that I owe everything to, it is my son-in-law. After it's all said and done, and you're home and you look at, you know, you're living, and you get to see your grandkids, and you get to see your kids and your friends and your loved ones, and all those things that are material, they don't mean nothing anymore. There's just so many things that are insignificant in life when you have been on death's door.
And that's our episode on Stayin Alive. A big thanks to our contributor, Jeff Pugh. Check out more of his work and links to some of our amazing characters on our website, headwaterspodcast.com. The Headwaters is created by the good folks at Kootenai Mountain Culture Productions and brought to you by Columbia Basin Trust. To find out more about all the good things the Trust does when it comes to supporting people and communities in the Columbia Basin, visit ourtrust.org. I'm Mitchell Scott. Thanks for listening.